Hey, what's up guys? Guardian here, coming to you guys with a brand new video today. And yeah, it's been a little while. Decided to take a little bit of a break with videos since well, the past couple of weeks in the UK has been rather warm. And honestly, I just didn't really feel like making anything. But yeah, we had some new sets come out in Vanguard. We had Booster Set 10 last month, and I believe in a week's time we have the Festival Collection coming out soon. So that's kind of like the time frame that we're at the minute. So we don't have any like the new over triggers yet for this deck profile, but uh, really though, I'm just sticking with the Keta one for Hexaorb for the time being. But you could experiment with the new sort of like neutral sort of over triggers in the festival collection. But yeah, mainly we're going to be showcasing the set 10 support that we got with Hexaorb Sorceress, and it's some pretty good stuff overall. And you can probably tell instantly what we're doing with the ride line and the main deck here. But yeah, we have the new Aquamarine Hexaorb Sorceress here. And yeah, without further ado, let's get stuck into the deck, and I'll show you guys what I'm playing. So, of course, we have the ride line. We are sticking to the usual Tri-Connect Sorceress, the T-Square Sorceress, Pentagleam Sorceress, and Hexaorb Sorceress. So, the main contention here is with the old Hexaorb Sorceress in the ride line. So, for when I was playtesting the newer Hexaorb Sorceress in the ride line, it really felt underwhelming. The power gain that you get from the old Hexaorb, being that you can give like a couple of units 10k power from like one trigger, is just a huge push that you can do, especially when you're going first and your opponents at a grade 2 10k Vanguard. Yeah, I just felt like the old one is a bit better. Like I said, I did test the new one in the ride line, and it can be okay, but I feel like the pushing potential of the original Hexaorb is just a little bit better. And of course, the original ride line pieces are still there, stacking the top three with the Pentagleam when you ride the Hexaorb Sorceress on top, and then of course the Counterblast to then draw a card with the T-Square. So yeah, same stuff as before. And then for the new stuff, we have of course 4 copies of our brand new Hexaorb Sorceress, and the Aquamarine Hexaorb Sorceress. So she's really cool. Basically, this unit is regarded as Hexaorb Sorceress, so it will count towards Persona riding on the original, which is nice. And then also, it says if you Persona ride this turn, this unit gets Drive +1, and the power increase of your trigger effects get 10,000 power. Now, this is pretty insane when you take in mind the context of front triggers, because front triggers apply 10,000 power to your front row. But because of this, it applies 20,000 power to the front row. So, yeah. With the old Hexaorb, basically when you got the trigger, you basically get to put 10,000 power on one of your rear guards. But because we're actually increasing the power increase of the trigger itself, it means that front triggers are now giving a 20k buff to our front row, making the late game quite brutal when it comes to this deck. And also that extra drive check, very nice as well. Allows us to see triggers more reliably. And then the creme de la creme, the cherry on top of this skill, is the last one, which is when a trigger unit is revealed from the drive check that this of the battle that this unit attacked, you can pay the cost of Soul Blast 1, choose one of your rear guards, and stand it. Now, something to note here is that it's not a once per turn, which means if you do see 2 triggers, you can stand 2 of your rear guards. But of course, you would have to stack that, you would have to like arrange that on the top of your deck to then guarantee the 2 restands there. But that is something to take in the mind there, especially if you can get that with a front trigger in mind. You're going to be hitting for some really big numbers and 5 attacks that turn, which is insane. So, yeah, and then by having the 4 copies of the Aquamarine in the main deck, it means that you actually have 4 Persona rides available in the main deck now, which is great. So, yeah. So 4 copies of those, and then of course to give the 5th Persona ride copy for the deck, we are playing the Gradale, just because Persona ride is super, super important. So yeah, we're just sticking with this for now for that extra Persona ride capability. So that is that. And then the remaining grade 3, since I am playing one more in the deck, and if the player mat didn't already give it away, I am playing the 2 copies of Represos. So this is an old card. It came out with set 2. It's a triple rare, and it's pretty simple. It says, if you Persona road this turn, this unit gets a boost. And then also, whilst in the back row rear guard circle, once per turn, when your other unit stands by a card's effect, you can stand this unit as well. So Yeah, it's just a 13k booster that you get during a Persona Ride turn that also restands itself, and then you can boost again with it. And because most of your stuff is like 20k, 25k, you're going to be hitting some pretty solid magic numbers with this. And it's just going to lay on that pressure that you need to make it so that your opponent has to guard with multiple cards in the hand, which is great. Now, there is another option that you can play over Rephrasos, which is the Gwendolyn, which is a rare grade 3, I believe, from set 7. That has like a guard restrict type effect where they have the guard in 2s, which I also think is pretty good. So I was kind of torn between what I wanted to do. I did test out the Gwendolyn, which also does work pretty well. But I think it's just, I kind of just preferred the Rephrasos just for the aesthetic and also the fact that it's quite old as well. And the fact that it's quite usable and good, nonetheless, in this deck is pretty cool. And I just wanted to play this one instead. So I think both of them have their merits. Both of them have seen some good results in the deck overall. So you can pick and choose whichever one you want to go for, but I decided to go for the Rephrasos at the end of the day. And then also, if push comes to shove, you do have the grade 3 here. So if you do see the over trigger at any point, you do have access to a grade 3 that you can at least get a twin drive from if that's something you want to go for. But yeah, outside of that, he's just a fantastic booster to get numbers and making your columns a lot bigger. So yeah. So with that, that is the grade 3s. So to go over the grade 2s, we have the brand new grade 2, the generic Cycle grade 2, which is Spiral QT Angel. So I've actually been using this card a lot in MLB recently, but of course it's fantastic in this deck as well. So of course the generic skill is the fact that you can discard it from your hand during the ride phase, and then pay the cost of Soul Blast 1, putting this unit to the bottom of the deck, and then you draw a card. So you're basically refunding the cost of a discard for the ride deck, but it does cost you a Soul Blast, so do bear that in mind. But we do have plenty of Soul Charge in this deck available, which is great. But yeah, just more ways of plussing, keeping your hand, and then seeing pieces, always nice. And then if that was enough, this second effect is also really good in the deck, which is when this unit is placed on rear, if you Persona Road this turn, you can counterblast and then look at the top 2 cards of your deck, choose a card from among them, add it to your hand, and then you put the rest to the top or bottom of the deck. So not only is this just good generically, right, for every Keta deck, but the bottom skill itself is also just good in this deck because it's a stack skill and it's a +1 as well, which is fantastic. So yeah, I don't think I could say more about this card. It's really, really good for the deck. Just works perfectly with what it wants to do, and also the generic cycle skill is warranted as well. So, moving on, we have, of course, the set 6 support with the Hexaorb Sorceress. This card was really, really cool when it came out, and it still is. So when placed, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, with Sorceress in the card name, you can counterblast to look at the top 2 cards of your deck. Choose up the 2 cards from among them, put them into your hand, and then you... if you took both of them into your hand, you have to put a card from your hand to the bottom of the deck, basically. But if you're putting any of them back, you can put them on the top or the bottom of your deck, basically. So it's a really good stacks card, but it's also just a way for you to plus as well. And then the second skill is basically just, during the battle, this unit attacked the Vanguard. Actually, I think that Vanguard bit's are ratted, I think. I think it's when it just attacks anything. Basically, as long as you Persona with the turn, this unit gets an extra 5k. So it just makes numbers a bit better. Gets over defensives, which is nice. But yeah, it's just a good stacks card. And also, one thing to take in mind with this is that when you're putting a card back into the bottom, back to the deck from your hand, if you do decide to draw the 2, I don't think we have access anymore to shuffling the deck. So do bear in mind that anything you do put back, you're probably not going to see anymore. So make sure it's pieces that you don't need excess of, or anything you don't need for that matter. So yeah. But yeah, 4 copies, just a really good plussing card, and yeah, stacks and pluses, always a good thing for Hexaorb. But yeah, Octoroy was always good ever since set 6 came out, so we're still playing that. And then the new card that we're playing is 4 copies of Effulgent Wizard. This card's insane, really good double rare. So basically, when this unit attacks, if you have a Vanguard with Sorceress in the card name, so do bear in mind you can use that on your grade 2 turn, since Pentagleam is of course a Sorceress. Yeah, so if you have a Sorceress Vanguard, when this unit attacks, you look at the top card of your deck, and if your Vanguard is stood, you may put that looked card into your soul. So only if the Vanguard stood, you may put that card you looked at into the soul, so it's a form of soul charge. But if not, if the Vanguard is rested, you just look anywhere. So that could be applicable, say, after your Vanguard swing, and it's like towards the end of the turn. You just get a cheeky look at the top of the deck and then know what's on there in case there's a trigger there for like a defensive or anything like that. And then the second skill is when your dry check reveals a trigger unit, this unit gets 5k. So yeah, simple. Just another way to get some more power. Just gets big and yeah, hits good numbers. But yeah, the fact that this is a soul charger as well as a checker to, you know, see if there's a trigger on top of the deck is just fantastic, and yeah, works really well. So playing 4 copies of those. And then for the final grade 2 that I decided to put in, I am playing 2 copies of Hexaorb Sorceress still. This is basically another form of soul charge that we can use, also in the early game. So when this unit is placed on rear, if you have a Vanguard with Sorceress in the card name, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put them on top of the deck in any order, then you soul charge 1. So one of those cards is going to go into the soul, but you could maybe rearrange them away to then have the preferable card on the top, be it a trigger or just a piece that you're looking for. But one thing I do like with this is the early game that it brings you. You know, you have the early game as well with your Effulgent Wizard, so I feel like playing more of these is kind of unnecessary, but I did want to play 2 of these in the deck just to have that extra soul charging options, since like I said, the cycle card is a soul blast, and there are a couple of other things in the deck that soul blast, as well as Hexaorb Sorceress herself. So yeah, I just felt like playing 2 copies of these to go along the Effulgent Wizard, basically. So 2 copies of that. And then for the grade 1s, we have a couple of 2-orbs here. I'm playing 2 copies of the Lalarita. I think this card's still pretty decent. A little bit of me kind of thought it was a bit win more, because you don't necessarily need this when you're restanding 2 of the rear guards with the Hexaorb Soul Blast, but what this card does do is that it gets around the fact that if you don't see 2 triggers, you can actually just have this instead, and then 1 trigger will still get you there to get the 5 attacks off. It will cost you a few more resources, because this is a Counter Blast, a Soul Blast, and you have to retire yourself. But yeah, it is what it is. You know, it's there if you need it, and it gives you that extra push with the multi-attacks if it comes up. But I feel like 2 copies is fine. It's more of like a late game sort of finisher type card, so I feel like 2's fine. But you can maybe bump it to 3 if there's like any other card choices that you don't really agree with, or you want to swap things around. You could probably play more copies of this, but I feel like 2 is fine to start with. So, for another new card, we have 2 copies of Replenishing Angel. So this card's pretty cool in the fact that when this unit boosts a rear guard, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, you can counterblast, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, choose up the 2 cards from among them, put them to the top of your deck in any order, and then put the rest to the bottom of your deck in any order. So yeah, it's a top or bottom check. You know, put them to the top or the bottom after you check the top 2, basically. It's basically just reassurance that you have the consistency of checking the deck so that you can try arrange those triggers for the Hexaorb. I don't think it's completely necessary at like more than 2. 3 is like a push, but yeah, again, it's one of those cards where I feel like it was more of a niche slot. You know, you could probably swap this out as well. But I also wanted to make sure I had enough grade 1 boosters in the deck, or just units in general that can boost, so that it can provide me a good booster for, say, something like my Hexaorb swing. Maybe if you want to put like a Lalarita behind it, just to make it more threatening. Because remember, you can do that trick where you can put a trigger on your Vanguard and then give the extra power to the rear guard, boosting the Hexaorb Sorceress. That's the original Hexaorb Sorceress, by the way, just to remember. Because it can make the grade 3 turn a bit more awkward to guard with by having that booster there. But yeah, it's more so an option. Yeah, I feel like this is more of a 2 off, 3 off type card if you wanted to play it. So yeah, I decided to go for 2. And then the final grade 1 I decided to play is 1 copy of the grade 1 Maple. Just because, yeah, we're going to be persona riding a lot. And if we see this, we just get it back, and it becomes a 13k booster for the turn. And also, the nice thing is that since a lot of our grade 2s like give themselves 5k power, we can actually make good numbers with this as well. Be it 23, 28, you know, those type of numbers are looking pretty good. So I decided to play the 1 copy of this. I've seen some lists where they played 2 of this, which could be warranted, just so you can like see it a bit faster, but that's up to you. But do remember, we do have the ref resources in the deck, so those also count as boosters technically. So yeah, so that's it for those. And then the final grade ones, of course, can't forget the perfect guards. So we have the 1 Elementaria and the 3 regular PG with this good skill, obviously. So yeah, don't really need to explain those. And then for the triggers, pretty simple. Of course, we have the Keto over trigger. Really good value because our reguards can get drive checks and we can benefit from those drive checks, which is pretty good. We have 4 copies of the skill crit. I have seen some decks where they just play the vanilla crit, so you don't have to play this if you don't own them. But I always like having the idea of, you know, having the soul available if it's needed. But with the Effulgent Wizard and also the Quadricast Sorceress, I feel like we're pretty okay on soul most of the time. But yeah, I've got these just in case. And also that 2k could be sometimes relevant for like Ref Resource maybe sometimes, but not much. And then I'm actually going for 7 crit in total, playing 3 copies of the Disma. The reason for this is, obviously, I'm playing for front triggers because, yeah, fronts are insane in this deck. I also wanted to put the 4th front in instead of going for 3 front because since I am playing a little bit higher of a grade 3 ratio by including the 2 Ref Resource, and then also having the Persona Ride order and then the regular Persona Rides with the Aquamarine, the 20k shield can actually be pretty nice for this. You know, outside of the aggressive nature of a front trigger for this deck, the defensive shield is pretty nice, and I think it's warranted when I'm playing the extra grade 3s as well. So that's that. And then the final trigger of the deck, obviously, is our 4 Circling Sorceress for the Hexaorb theme. But yeah, you can play some crit heals instead. The ones that get more shield if your opponent's unit's got a crit in it outside of a trigger effect. Since obviously we have Gandiva rolling around and, you know, Eva is going around as well with the crits on the rear guards. So yeah, it is what it is. But I feel like this trigger ratio is quite nice. But if you really wanted to, you can just replace the 4th front for, say, an 8th crit if you want to do that, just for the more crit pressure. But yeah, I kind of want to go with 4 fronts because I think 4 fronts is pretty funny in the deck right now. But yeah, that's pretty much the deck. Overall, I think the deck's pretty fun. Still getting used to it overall, but it hasn't really changed that much. It's just that we've got some new tools to play with and new toys to play with overall here. And yeah, I do like the fact that, you know, a card like Ref Resources became a lot better now with this deck, just with that power pushing as well with the boosting. And yeah, even some other tech choices that I've seen here and there have also been pretty good choices as well to test with. So if you guys have any suggestions for the deck, do leave it in the comment section below. In terms of an update, I am planning to do a review video for this thing. I decided to get the Gamegenic Vanguard deck box, which I wasn't particularly fond of when it was like getting announced or it was coming out, when some other content creators were showcasing it. And there are still things about it that I'm not happy with, but overall I think the quality of the box is pretty good. But I am going to do a standalone review video for that at some point. Not too sure when though. And then I also have some deck profiles coming out for a new deck, as well as an update from will be at some point in the future, probably when the festival collection comes out, and I update that with like the new OT and maybe some of the new artwork for the triggers. But besides from that, that's it for the Hexaorb deck. Hope you guys enjoyed. Deck log is in the description as always, and I will catch you guys in the next video. This is Guardian 205, signing out.